Good morning, everyone. I hope you have your coffee, tea, and maybe a breakfast snack. My name is Kim Poe. I'm the Children and Young Adult Consultant from the Connecticut State Library, and we are here today for our third session that's a part of this Trauma Informed Services series. Today's session is called Unlocking the Principles of Trauma Informed Services, Part 2. For anyone who missed part one, or our very first session that we had with Beatrice, which was decoding the neurobiology of trauma. The recordings are available along with slides on the GELS LibGuides page under the Trauma Informed Services tab. GELS stands for Growing Equitable Library Services. Every session that is a GELS session that you see on LibGuides or in emails is for everyone. We curate these because everyone who will ever interact with a human in a library at some point needs to know at least a little bit of this. So I'm not going to eat up too much of our time. I'm going to introduce Beatrice again and then turn the session over to her. Beatrice de la Espriella is a licensed clinical social worker and mental health expert in anxiety, stress, and trauma. Beatrice works with individuals and libraries to improve the mental health and well-being of library staff so they can feel empowered to serve their community and thrive personally and professionally. She provides training and coaching to libraries on trauma-informed services, mindfulness, self-care, and more. Beatrice developed a trauma-informed services professional development curriculum that highlights the prevalence of trauma and provides library staff with essential skills to recognize and respond to trauma. Beatrice launched the Empowered, Confident, and Thriving, a mental wellness program for library staff that focuses on promoting mental well-being by practicing self-care, building resilience, and getting the tools and strategies needed to navigate life's challenges. Beatrice earned her MSW from Rutgers University and her trauma-informed professional certification from Barry University. And again, this is the third of 6 sessions. So if something does not come up in this session, it might have been in the first 2, or it's going to be in the 3 that come after this. Thank you so much, Beatrice. You're always great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So I am super, super excited to be here today. I don't know, it sounds kind of weird, like, oh, trauma gets me excited. No, it's about sharing knowledge. I think that's how I feel about the whole situation. So we do have a lot to cover, and I want to go ahead and get started. I am going to go a quick overview of part one, especially for anyone that was not here. But also, if you do have questions, please make sure that you put them in the chat or in the Q&A section, any clarifications so that I can go ahead and address them as we go. I do quick pauses in between to just kind of check in and make sure we're good. But then the 3 guiding principles that we're going to talk about are collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, cultural, historical, and gender issues. But I do have a little section about what's next and kind of like some things for you to think about. But then also the last 3 webinars that we were going to be doing. And I kind of want to talk about those a little bit as we wrap up so that you know what happens next. So what do we do with this information? How can we take it forward? And then we're definitely going to do our Q&A. All right. So overview. For one thing, we might be talking about some topics that could be uncomfortable to you. So please be mindful yourself. Like if you need to take some time away to to step away from the presentation, I completely understand. But please make sure you do check with someone. I am a therapist. I have my own private practice, so I'm always thinking about making sure that every one of us is in a good place mentally, physically, and emotionally, and we all feel safe. So just keeping that in mind. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to move my thing right over here. During the first part of these 2-part series webinar that we had on trauma-informed services, we defined trauma. We had a definition for trauma as an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that are experienced by an individual as either physical or emotionally harmful or life-threatening. But most importantly, there was this lasting adverse effects on the individual. So there was an impact. So these events and series of events impacted the individual so much that impacted their functioning, like social behaviors, impacted their functioning, also like mentally, physically, emotionally. They're completely impacted their well-being. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we mention trauma. Some examples of trauma that we discussed were adult trauma, trauma of poverty, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, even divorce. But most importantly, we talked about adverse childhood experiences, and these are called in the shorter term ACEs, ACEs. And adverse childhood experiences are potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood, so 0 to 17 time frame. And these are important, these traumatic events that take place are important because they were found to be linked to chronic health problems, right? So it's like, issues with hearts, digestive issues like chronic health problems, diabetes, and things like that. But it also was found to negatively impact someone's mental health, even their education, finding a job, their well-being, and relationships with others. We're going to talk more about relationships today as we get there. So, and we talked specifically about trauma-informed care and trauma-informed services, and this idea of what is shifting the mindset of what is wrong with you to what happened to you. We reviewed the 4 R's of trauma informed care, which are realizing, recognizing, responding, and assist in re-traumatization. This particular framework recognizes the pervasive and enduring nature of trauma, and it incorporates this knowledge about trauma to create safe spaces for the people that we serve. But most importantly, again, I just kind of want you to keep that in mind that trauma-informed services and trauma-informed care focuses on shifting our mindset to what is wrong with that individual to what happened to that individual to behave and act in this way. Trauma-informed services has these two ways of or switching. So there's a non-trauma informed approach, which is people need fixing first. There's right or wrong. There's just black and white. There's no gray areas. There's a compliance and obedience kind of mindset. There's presenting issues only and just whatever it's in the front of you. And then also non-trauma informed approaches. Just kind of think of people making bad choices. Like that's all they do. But a trauma informed approach looks at people need safety first. We need to acknowledge safety. There are multiple points of view. We need to collaborate and empower those individuals that experience trauma, which we'll talk about empowerment today as well. We want to look also as the person as a whole, not just that individual moment that's happening, but let's go ahead and take a sit back. So think of it as when you're at the movie theater and you're right at the front of the movie theater, and usually you only get to see like a smidge of, or at least a part of like the movie that you're watching. It's kind of like uncomfortable, right? But if you get to see back, you get a much wider view. And that's what a trauma-informed approach is. Let's go ahead and take a look at the person as a whole and their history to understand them a little bit more. And then also trauma-informed approach is understanding that people who feel unsafe, they tend to do unsafe things. Okay. All right. Now, this is a quick introduction of all the guiding principles. I am going to go a little bit on the first three that we talked, but I'm not going to go too much into it because we do have a lot to discuss. But the 6 key guiding principles were developed by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and they are safety, trustworthiness, and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice, and choice. And the last one is called cultural, historical, and gender relevant. These key principles, it's not a checklist or a technique, it's more of a guide. And we should be looking at them constantly whenever we're implementing changes and approaching a trauma or looking at a trauma from approach to the services that we provide. During the first part, we talked about these 3 guiding principles. So quickly over it, we talked about safety. And the most important takeaway that I want you to take for that is it's everyone's safety and not just the patrons or the individuals and the clients that we serve, but also the staff. We want to look at the staff safety. And not just emotionally, but also physically, right? We want to look at both things. So when you sit down with your team and try to address, like, is our agency feeling safe? Like, our staff members, can we look at our physical building? Are there any areas that do not feel safe? Let's go ahead and ask our patrons what their thoughts are. But then also, asking staff members, like, what do you think about safety with when it comes to you? Like, do you feel safe coming to work every day? Just kind of like having those open questions. Trustworthiness and transparency. We're looking at agency operations and decisions that are made with transparency and with the goal of developing and maintaining trust among staff and those receiving services. So again, trustworthiness is our actions matching our words, values, and beliefs. So individuals get to trust us if we, whatever comes out of our mouth actually matches our values. Whatever we say matches our beliefs, and being able to gain that trust with them. And transparency, it's mainly just sharing with them, being transparent about our policies, procedures, and the things that we have in place. And the last thing that we covered was peer support, which is a key vehicle for building trust, establishing safety, and empowerment. You will notice that these guiding principles kind of build among each other. They're not just like a standalone situation, they're just built among each other. And then the most important for peer support is where individuals use their story and lived experience to promote recovery and healing. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and share your personal story. That's everyone's specific journey. But mainly of understanding, I was like, what I went through, could they possibly live the same experience or similar experience? And how can I promote that recovery for them? What can I do? How can we encourage that healing for them as well? All right, I'm going to go ahead and check in. Any questions or anyone needs me to clarify anything from the previous um, presentation? No? All right. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's talk about the three remaining guiding principles: collaboration and mutuality. So the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration defines this guiding principle as recognizing that healing happens in relationships and that the meaningful sharing of power and decision making. So the organization recognizes that everyone, not just staff, but everyone has a role to play in a trauma-informed approach. And that one of us, we don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. I do want to open it very quickly on the chat, and I want to hear your thoughts on that last sentence right there. One does not have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. Just kind of want to know if you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's totally okay. If, I just kind of, do you agree or disagree? Let's just go ahead and do that. You don't have to give me your point of view. But agree or disagree, I'm going to see in the chat. Or I don't know, I don't have an answer. One does not need to be a therapist to be therapeutic. Very strongly agree. Okay, I got some agrees. Good. Okay. All right, I got some definitely. Anyone can listen. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Thank you. So I think that's one of the takeaways, that it's very important when we're talking about, because we're going to talk about relationships, collaborating and feeling that mutuality with those individuals and connecting with them doesn't mean that you're going to become their therapist. Doesn't mean that you can't listen to some of the things that they're going to say, and you're not going to listen to solve anything, right? You're not going to listen um to necessarily give them solutions, or but mainly we're wanting to listen to guide them into those resources that can better support them. So if we have a moment to just be that person and sit with them and even just be in silence, sometimes we get super uncomfortable with silence, and that's okay. We don't have to always say everything, right? We don't have to have an answer for them. We can always come back to whatever they say to us. We can say, you know what? That's like a lot. Sounds like you're going through a lot right now. I don't know necessarily what to say, but I really appreciate you sharing that with me. That's it, right? So having them and giving them the opportunity to do that, I think is very, very fundamental and very, very important. Okay. So there are two keywords or phrases in this particular definition that they use, and for me are relationships and the sharing of power in decision making, right? So when we're talking about relationships, it's that meaningful connection we have with another human being, right? It is in our nature to want and need to feel connected, to feel loved. And when we feel connected, we feel safe. There's a level of safetiness, right? Relationships are paths to healing. They allows us to learn from others and share with others. I'm sure you can think back of as you were growing up, maybe there was one trusting adult that you had a really good relationship with. Maybe there was that one individual that you remember. It's like, yeah, that teacher, she wasn't, you know, that much, but she always said good morning to me. Or, maybe there was that one trusted person that always asks you, how are you doing today? Right? So there's just something to think about when it comes to connection. Um, Once there is a connection and relationships are established, we have an opportunity to collaborate with individuals because they have a level to trust us. They can feel connected with us and share their own experiences so that we can better serve them. You know, um, I will say that a lot of individuals who have a history of trauma tend to avoid and sometimes even fear building relationships. They don't want that connection because for them, they have been let down in the past. So for them, it might be very difficult to build those relationships, right? They have been let down and they try to like push away. And sometimes they think like, why are you any different? Right? But in order for us to collaborate with individuals and actually ask them to come in and share, hey, how can I support you? Why are they going to trust you and answer that question when you have never talked to them one on one, right? When you've never had a good conversation with them. And these are some of the things that I wanted to kind of share with you um, when it comes to the strategies to building those relationships. Before I jump into that, I think that the biggest part that makes us look away from implementing uh, relationships or establishing or building connections with others, such as our patrons, our clients, or any service industry, is that we believe we have to become friends with them. We don't, right? The reality is that we don't necessarily have to be friends. There are a few things that we could do to kind of build those relationships that allows them to trust us. So then we can start collaborating, right? So then we can ask the questions like, how can I best support your needs? Right. And, maybe you have a program you want to implement and you want to invite everyone to come in and you're telling, you're handing out pamphlets or whatever it might be. But this person doesn't know you. This person's never seen you, never heard your voice ever. How can they feel trusted to walk into a building for a program where you're asking them to share their own experiences or you're asking them to be present in a place that they may not feel safe? So let's start with something as simple as let's say good morning, right? This could be the start and the end of a conversation. That's it. A simple good morning. It could be the start of a conversation, or that would be the only conversation you would have with that individual, and that's okay. But it could definitely make a difference on that person's day. You have no idea how many times I walk into Starbucks, and it happened yesterday. It also happened this morning. And that tells you I go to Starbucks a lot. I walked in and they acknowledged me. I was in my head, but they acknowledged me. This is, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm good. It just kind of threw me off, but they acknowledged me as I was leaving. Have a good day. I don't know this person. I don't know this person, but it made a difference on my day. Simple good morning. How's it going? Great. Smile. It's a natural way of connecting. Asking questions. We're not talking about being intimidating in the individual. So, tell me about your credit score kind of thing, but more of like, how are you doing? Do you have any plans today? right? Is there anything that you're doing fun? Oh, no. Okay, well, let us know if you ever find anything. There was somebody that asked someone at Starbucks, oh, where are you guys going? Do you guys live here? And they were like, well, I felt like that was a little bit intrusive. They were asking a lot of questions. We don't need to go that deep, but just letting them know it's like, hey, I kind of care. Maybe you notice a specific patron that comes in every once in a while and just asking those questions. Just like, yeah, I got any plans for today? And even if there's no answer, that's okay, right? It shows them that you have an interest. And I think that's more valuable than anything else. You may not get an answer the first time around. You may not even get a nod. But that's okay. You did your part and you move on with your day. We talked about listening. And I think it's more about being in tune with the words that they're saying, their body language. What are they really saying? Are they struggling with that machine because it's really the machine that they're worrying with? Could there be something else going on? Is there anything I can help you with? Situations like that. Let's read their body language and see if there's other things that could be happening to what they're saying. Say their name. If you know the name, of course, be able to say their name. One day, I don't remember who it was, but I handed out my ID to someone, and when they gave it back to me, they actually say, "Have a good day, Beatrice." And to me, it was like, "Oh, that was nice." So, if somebody's giving you their ID to get a library card and you respond back with, "Have a good day, Mary," that as you're handing them back the card, it's like, oh, she acknowledged me. She said my name. There's power in saying our names and when we hear it, and they might even say to you, it's like, oh, I don't say it like that. And you're like, so tell me, say it. And it starts a conversation. But there's so, so much power in that. And then let's say something kind. You don't always have to say it, but how wonderful is it for us? Like, think about when you're going through your day and somebody actually says something nice to you and they say, I like your dress or I like your shoes. I had someone say to me, it's like, I had this dress I wore and I was not feeling confident in it that much, but there was this woman and I have the image in my mind and she said, girl, I love that dress. Boom, it made a difference in my day. And I rocked that dress that day. So saying something kind, of course, we want to mean it, right? But this is how we build those relationships. This is what we need to build our relationship. So then we can collaborate with that individual and ask those deeper questions and say, hey, what kind of services do you think you would want here at the library? What do we're trying to implement a coffee and talk day. Do you think that would be something that you would want to join? No, I don't think so. Oh, what are your reservations? Well, this and that or whatever. I don't have daycare. I thought of something. Now you have a way to problem solve that individual to get him in the door. But again, I think it all starts with building those relationships. All right. Any quick questions? All right. So the next keyword or phrase that I want to kind of go over is sharing power in decision making, right? This is another key aspect of the guiding principle for collaboration and mutuality. And it's partnering and leveling that power difference between the staff and the people we serve, but also among staff within the organization. There's always this chart that I see where library staff, it's here, and then there's librarians or paraprofessionals, and then there's like it goes up, and then there's the director, and then there's the board. So there's one up above the other. So we always have this power struggle and power differences, but absolutely, we need certain decision making power. Some individuals need to make more decisions than others. I totally understand. There's nothing wrong with listening to the individual that actually gets to see that patron that comes in and has a difficulty every single day because they're being disruptive, which I don't like that word, but we're going to use that word for today, right? We're talking about all staff. Everyone has a role, and an important role in developing this trauma-informed approach, right? Just as the administrator who's working on making sure that we have a trauma-informed approach, that administrator is not going to be the one implementing the trauma-informed services. The library staff and the front lines is. So they need a seat at the table. That's what we need to look into. So here's a few questions for you to look into, and everyone's going to get the slides, so don't worry about writing any of this stuff. who would you invite or, into collaborating with you, right, to develop this procedures? Make a list of who are the individuals that you want to invite. Um, you know, how would it look like in your library? And are you also thinking about inviting outside agencies? Is it just patrons, or are you also thinking of community leaders? Like, can you think of anyone else that can come into the library? All right, any questions about this? I want to do a quick check-in before I move on to my next guiding principle. All right, I don't see any. All right, unless if I miss any, Kim and Ashley, please let me know. All right, so our next one, and I think this is my favorite one. Empowerment, voice, and choice. The key here is to place the people that we serve and staff at the center, right? So the agency must believe in resiliency and the ability of that individual and the organization to work together towards some way of healing and recovering from that trauma, right? So we want to look at the services that we provide as a way to empower the individuals to make decisions, empower staff to make decisions, to let their voice be heard, right? We want to also look at the history to see if at any point your client or your patron's voice was ever dismissed. Was there ever a power shift that took place that certain individuals in your community's voice, their voice was not heard? Let's look at that history, let's look at that. Is there anything that could have happened? And how can we move from that? What can we learn from past experiences? And what do we need to do to move towards that healing? Right? So we want to be able to think about what has happened in our community, who is in our community, and how their voice has ever been dismissed. And if you don't have the answer to it, again, that's where we go back to this idea of trusting, the idea of building relationships. That's when we want to ask, how has your voice been dismissed? How have you not had a chance? But then also, when it comes to trauma, and again, the idea of the trauma is so prevalent, the, the thing that happens is that when an individual experiences a traumatic event, their voice in their decision making, their level of empowerment has been taken away from them, right? So, and we want to work towards a level of self advocacy. So, we want to work towards having the individual learn to find their voice, learn to speak up for themselves in a way that is healthy instead of, I'm going to yell at the staff member because I'm not getting my way. And this is how I'm going to speak up for myself because this is all I know. And this is the only way I've known to speak up for myself. I have to yell, I have to throw things. And unfortunately, that's the behavior of the individual. So as staff, we want to look at it as like, how can we go back to it and learn? It's like, okay, how can we empower them? How can we allow them to make a choice, right? When we provide a voice and a choice to them, they can learn to make decisions on their own, which is usually a lot of the times their decision making has been taken away from them, right? So as I mentioned before, we want to look at the history, the power difference. Has anything happened? And how can we avoid it? How can we create steps to not do something like that? So keep the one thing that I want you to take away from this for empowerment, voice, and choice, this guiding principle, it's that empowering them and allowing them to have that voice removes that power difference between us and them kind of mindset, and it places us on the same level. I am aware that there are certain things that we cannot um, choose, and again, because that's our society. Again, we're in that power structure where people above us make certain decisions, but there's nothing better than allowing those individuals that get impacted by our decisions to again have a seat at the table and help us make those to have those conversations. I want to do a quick check-in. All right, so let's see. Um, Welcome to Moe's. Oh my gosh, I missed that one. Yeah, exactly. It was great. Yeah, that's a big one. Um, customer service trainer at Whole Foods. Oh my, it's insane. They always have a conversation with you as at your checkout. It's like, and I'm walking kind of a little bit lost and looking at me, and they're like, "Do you need anything?" And I'm like, "Oh, and Publix has another one too for us and here in Florida. That's like our your Whole Foods are Publix. Um, okay, so let's see. Um, Dismissal of staff voices also creates a trauma that affects the staff themselves and the way they serve the community. Yeah, so I kind of want to address that a little bit because I was talking to Ashley and Kim right before this, and we definitely we want to have I I'm going to stop using the word protocol because I that insinuates policy, and I think we don't need another policy. I think we just need people to be human and understand that if a staff member has a difficult conversation, whatever that is, because difficult for me is different to someone else. If they had a difficult conversation and they're not emotionally regulated and they're not ready to get back on the front lines and not ready to go, their voice needs to be heard. And it is up to me as a director or a supervisor, head of staff, whatever it might be, to allow that individual staff member to come in and say, "Hey, talk to me. That must have been really hard. I I could see it. I could see your body. Tell me what's happening. Tell me a little bit. Whatever it might be, let their voice be heard because it allows them to say, acknowledge their feelings, right? And validate that, yes, it was a difficult moment, but we can get through it. Let's go ahead and get that, move forward. All right. So the next guiding principle, cultural, historical, and gender relevant. In this guiding principle, we're looking at organizations that get rid of these unfair judgments about individuals, whether it's based on race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Um, you know, we we basically want to look at make sure that everyone's treated fairly, especially with the services that we provide to different genders, different race. We want to be able to put um, rules in place that are going to avoid some level of re-traumatization. This is the most important thing when it comes to cultural, historical, and gender relevant informed services. We always want to think in the back of our mind, what have they experienced that we don't want it to happen again because of something we said, right? So being aware and gaining the training of the different cultures and what has happened to that particular population, especially if it's a population that you serve on a regular. I think that's the most important to think about. Survey who your population is, know who that group is to be able to provide them with the best services possible. And what can we do about it? So here's some questions and things for you to think about. Are there services offered by the library, that are gender responsive? Are we checking off these, things like on the surface, or are we really engaging on a one-on-one basis with individuals that way? So for example, our LGBTQ related exhibits only during the month of June. Do we want why cannot we do it throughout the year so it's readily accessible? And I know we highlight, certain areas. I think I walked into my library and they had I think it was St. Patrick's. There was a book, there was an area, and I was like, oh, I forgot that a St. Patrick's was happening. So there was like, oh, a quick reminder. But I want to also be able to see easily access other resources. As I walk in, I want to be, in the face of something, even if it's regarding women, that is not during Women's History Month. Just kind of like that mindset. Are we just checking it off the surface? And it's okay. I'm not saying to not do them. We want to maybe even do it more, but why not every day? Why not every day? Why not provided it, throughout the year? So these are just some things to think about, right? Um, for in here, when it comes to historical, a trauma-informed approach also recognizes and addresses historical trauma. So the Administration for Children and Family defines historical trauma as a multi-generational trauma experience by a specific cultural, racial, ethnic group. So in these, we're talking about major events like slavery, the Holocaust, forced migration, violent colonization of Native Americans. So again, survey your population. What are the needs? Who is the population that you're serving? And it's even if there is a small group, how can we approach that group as well? So I know we have like greater populations. It's like, oh, mine, it's 80% white or 75% black, whatever it might be. Um, but what about that 2 and 1%? What about those smaller percents? Is there something that how can we work with them and talk and help them support them in that healing process if they do enter into our libraries? How can we support them when they do come in, especially again doing a survey of your population, in your group? Historical trauma can have an impact on the psychological and physical health of individuals. And it definitely can impact how they feel, how they act, even if they were not there. At times they might experience things like feeling sadness, depression, ye- obsessive thoughts as to what happened, and even not feeling good about themselves or even angry about what happened. Even though they were not there. So they still have those feelings and emotions, and that's where the historical trauma, it's a huge impact. So we want to be respectful, we want to understand that there's certain uh, different reactions to traumatic events. And this one in particular, I wanted to talk about cultural issues. So if you're not aware of the impact of so every culture deals with trauma completely different. So becoming aware of that, I think it's very important. So we want to ask questions like what worries them the most, or what might be some fears that might have. So for example, how do you think they feel about outside referrals and resources? So this particular one, I want to address like immigrants, undocumented immigrants. Let's say your library has a protocol or a process. I like that one better. A process to refer individuals out, and but some individuals don't have the documentation to do that. So before following the process and referring them out, we want to be aware of like, how do they feel? Are you comfortable with me sending this information to them? If not, then, here's some resources. How can we support them so that it reduces that fears, the potential to be in experienced in re-traumatization? There's a cultural humility competency self-assessment that I think it would be important for everyone to kind of look at, and it's important to address cultural humility and competency when in a way, and you'll get access to this, but I want you to think of it, it's not about learning everything about that culture because it's very difficult. We can't really get to that, but just being aware of some of the experiences that might have had and how it might impact them in the services that we provide to them. Okay. All right. So the one thing that I want you to take away when it comes to this assessment or the cultural, historical, and gender issues, I think it's we need to do a self-reflection. So when we are addressing cultural and historical and gender issues and we're sitting in a team and we're saying, hey, we're going to be trauma informed. And now we got to this guiding principle, this cultural, historical, and gender issues. The key questions we need to ask yourself is which parts of my identity am I aware of? Which are more silent, which parts of my identity I feel like I privileged or marginalized, and what might be my own blind spots and biases. So when we do trauma informed services, a lot of the time we start thinking of like, what can we do for them? What can we do to help them? How can we provide services? But for this one, I want you to take the moment of like, oh, let's kind of look internally for a second. What might be my own bias? what might be the agency's bias or blind spots that we might be experiencing right now, and how can we move that um, moving forward, right? So how can we address that? One of the things that I love about libraries is when they have book clubs, and it's just like great, we get to talk about it, to have conversations, and you can have conversations around difficult issues like culture and oppression and things like that. One thing that I would say, try to partner up with a mental health provider when you do have some of these difficult conversations, because if possible, if something does happen with someone feels a little, triggered, and maybe they have someone that can process that moment with, instead of just sending them out, and things like that. So just something to think about. All right. So, I want to make sure we have plenty of time for a Q&A, because I do remember last time we kind of ran out of time. So I want to make sure we do have some time. But here's what I would like for you to take away from this, and this is from the last presentation, which you have access to, into this one, is that these guiding principles are only the foundation of the work that you're doing or plan to do. It's not enough to just take this training and, just learn about trauma, that's awesome. But to me, the most important thing is that part of implementation, right? To actually have a sit down with everyone. You have your staff, your community leaders, community members, anyone that's impacted by the services that you offer, and this is where you want to, again, ask yourself, are you, as a staff member, sitting at the table where decisions are being made? And are you also allowing others to come in and sit and collaborate with you? Those two questions are my biggest thing. Like when we're getting to the implementation phase, definitely think about, how can I be part of the decision making and sharing that collaboration, and who else can I invite to come in and be part of this? So, with that being said, what's next? So, I wanted to make sure I highlighted the next three webinars that are coming up. The next one will be creating a trauma-informed library environment. As you guessed it, it's all about the environment. It's all about the physical building. So, we're going to talk more about that. The next one is becoming and planning for trauma-informed services. So, this one takes a step. It's a level up of everything we talked about. So it focuses more on like a step-by-step process of it becoming a trauma-informed library, and also planning to do that. Like, what's the process that you could take to get that taken care of? And then the last one is navigating trauma, and this is insights for LGBTQ children and immigrant populations. So this one, we're going to dive in more on that cultural aspect and gender relevant issues that for these unique populations that we want to work with, as we understand more about their own trauma and how can we best support them. All right, any questions? Let's see. Ashley, do you have any?
Yeah, the only question I have at the moment, and I know we are going to share the slides, but is the self-assessment something that can be dropped into
Yeah,
the chat if you have
I
that?
can do that right now. Yeah, let me
Thank you.
let me get it. And then
And if anyone else has questions to post in the chat, or if you want to unmute, I can let folks do that and ask a question as well.
so I'm gonna, yeah, in the meantime, let me put this in the chat, the self-assessment. So it's like a PDF, so make sure that I'll see. Can somebody click on
Yep,
it and make sure?
I just did. Let's see. I was able to access it if somebody else wants to confirm that they were.
Yeah, yeah, so it's a one
Great.
sheet,
Thank
and it's
you,
just,
Carolyn.
yay, awesome. Yeah, and it's just, focuses on that, just kind of like our own internal assessment. But I think it's just very important to, when it comes to cultural, historical, and gender relevant issues, I think we need to do an assessment. This is a personal one, I think, but also you should look into the libraries too. Like, what is the cultural level, like that the library overall feels, that they could, are we um are we communicating in the best way that we can with our patrons when it comes to that? So just curious about that. But any other questions? Um, any other thoughts?
I'll give people a moment to think or type, but I appreciate the assessment. I think, and what you're alluding to, a sort of like institutional assessment, I think is also important. And I will say, we built into our sort of strategic plan for the next 5 years to do some of that, establishing sort of like best practices guidelines around, right, this equity work. I also just really appreciate your concluding kind of point that, you know, a lot of this does start with inner work. You know, it's not just about the organization or the policy. There is this individual component. I think that's super important. And I will just keep talking unless other folks have questions, because I was going to add that one of the things you said that I just found striking, and I haven't done, or, you know, when I was on the public library side, but I really appreciated your point about sort of inviting in stakeholders to those policy reviews or policy discussions, you know, whether that's, you know, other, if you're a city department or a town department, other, you know, people who work alongside of you, or partner stakeholders, or even like community members to that process. I just, to me, that was a really kind of simple way to share some of that power and decision making. And so I that is an idea I'm taking.
Yeah. And if you think about it too, like, so think about the organizations that serve your population. So if you have a high homeless population, where's the homeless coalition? Can they send a representative to come in and you can hear what are they experiencing? Because again, you may not be able to sit down with a homeless individual and have a conversation and say, hey, what can I do to help you? But they might trust the coalition, who then in turn tells you, hey, maybe it's not appropriate to have the food pantry here. For them, it would be appropriate to have it here. Whatever it might be, simple things like that, you know, children, you know, the school district, you know, who's your closest school to you, and being able to have that and allow them to sit at the table with you because they have the ear for those individuals that you're serving.
Absolutely. I think when I did a fair amount of community engagement work, and I think what you're touching on of who is a community's trusted source, right? Where are they going if they're not coming to the library? And then how can you partner with that trusted source to work together, and to work with that community? Yeah, totally striking to me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it seems like we don't have any questions. So
It's okay.
okay. I mean, this is
Yeah.
a lot of information. It's a lot of good stuff. And you always share excellent resources. And we will be sharing this recording. We will share all of Beatrice's slides with those links. I am out next week, so it will take me a little bit longer to get that recording up. So look for it kind of in that first week of May, or whatever the week is after next.
Yes.
That recording will be up, but Beatrice will be with us again on Tuesday. So if you have not registered and want to, check out that CE calendar link. You can register for all of the upcoming sessions. And of course, after this, you will be getting our evaluation. And please take a minute, respond. It really helps us just think about how to grow this work and how to grow GELS. So we appreciate it. I'm going to pop that link here too, so that folks have it if they want to do it.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you,
Excellent.
everyone.
Lots of thanks. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.